And we are live. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jessper Maquindang. And if you want to build a stronger team and a more effective company culture, you're in the right place. In each episode, our guests share tips, insights, and ideas to help you and your people thrive. And today, we have a special guest. And as we welcome our guest, let's learn more about Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. Lindsay Harle-Kadatz is a Values Vixen, speaker, and business consultant who specializes in team behavior and culture alignment. She supports leaders who want to have an immediate and lasting impact on their people. And it starts with values, the tasty mental prune juice that gives leaders better brain flow for guiding, connecting, and leading their teams to greatness. A neuro change method master practitioner, behavior specialist, and listening facilitator, Lindsay uses a different lens for connecting leaders to their values, values to behavior, and behavior to actions that, that matter to create optimal business performance and bottom line results. Let's welcome Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. Lindsay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jessper. Looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. How are you?
Doing well this Monday. Doing well.
Excellent. And I'm so excited about today's conversation about this topic of values. I'm really curious. Lindsay, tell me about the research in the field.
Oh golly, there's loads of research in the field. So, what would you like me to tell you specifically?
Are there? I'd like to learn some stats that you have for us.
Yeah, okay. So as you had highlighted, I specialize in values, which is really key for creating engagement and real action that matters within our organizations beyond these fluffy marketing statements that so many organizations have on their walls, or in their once a year annual town hall meetings where they say, these are our values. Woot! The thing is, when we are only operating with these fluffy value statements, our organizations have super duper low engagement. And where that comes from is often because our managers are not operating in alignment with their authentic values. And one of the most disconcerting stats that have come across is when we see really unmotivated, disengaged managers, we see an incredible drop in productivity, up to like 39% drop in productivity. But more so is disengaged leaders leads to disengaged employees. And the recent 2025 Gallup State of the Global Workplace report that just came out indicates that we have 62% of our employees are disengaged. And that number remains the same as last year with their last year report. However, one number it changed from 15% of our employees are actively disengaged, which was last year, to 17% are actively disengaged this year. And the difference between simple disengagement and active disengagement, so disengagement is simply low morale, not really being tied to your work, kind of ho-humming along. Active disengagement with employees is when an employee is actively working against the organization. So they're showing up, they're complaining, they're not just ho-humming their way with low morale, they are actively hindering the performance of the entire organization. And so even if it's, from 15% up to 17%, that's still an increase of active disengagement, which is concerning. So that's one stat. Now, other stats. Here's the thing. When we have highly engaged people within our teams, and again, it starts with that manager level to really inspire our people. When we have highly engaged people on our teams, we have 21% more profitability, and 17% more productivity. And so you can see how it's crucial to have highly engaged individuals from a monetary standpoint, from an output standpoint, not to mention from a mental wellness standpoint, right? Because there's stats on that as well. So what does that mean if we're seeing active disengagement go up versus what can happen when we have highly engaged teams?
Absolutely. That's such great research. And Lindsay, I did look into this research as well. And when it comes to engagement and values, I read somewhere that this is research from SHRM, and I wanted to get your perspective. And they discovered that more than 50% of workers do not even know their company's core values. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Agreed completely. My thoughts on that are, yep, that's not surprising. Because so many of us are, even thinking back to my days when I worked in an organization as an employee, we're given the values in onboarding. Okay, that's it. Alternatively, coming from my own background as well, we were forced is a strong word, but we were highly encouraged to memorize what the values were and to be able to repeat back what the definition was. Yet, we were never told this is what they look like in action on a day-to-day basis as modeled by the leadership team. And so I'm not surprised that that number is 50%. That does not surprise me in any way, shape, or form, as it's quite common, and a lot of the times I go in and I work with companies right now on gaining the clarity, not just of, well, what are your values, but what are they in action? What is the shared language between everybody as to what these definitions mean to everybody, so that even when we're taking the definition in and we're interpreting them all the same now. And that is not done very often. So so how could a company know what their values are? How could people know what their values are if the leadership team isn't invested in bringing everybody together to get this shared understanding, in bringing themselves as a leadership team together to understand how they model them consistently on that day-to-day basis? And so, no, that's not surprising at all. And I think even like from a Glassdoor study a few years back, they highlighted that it was values, culture, and senior leadership were the top three factors to employee satisfaction over and above compensation. So it's kind of, okay, well, values are very important to having engaged individuals on your team. How are we helping people understand what the heck they are beyond, here's what they are in an onboarding document, don't worry about it from here on out?
That is excellent consider. And similar research, I found something from Gallup, and they mentioned that even if employees do know their values, only 23% of employees strongly agree that their organization's values apply to everyday work. I want to get your thoughts.
Yep. So absolutely. And I think that's because so a lot of the work that I do is because let's back up a little bit. So first, let's understand what the heck values are over and above just us saying the word. And so while I know that like our personal values are our underlying beliefs upon which we take aligned action, corporate values are the underlying collective beliefs and principles and philosophies upon which we take aligned action to drive business forward. So it's the same, but very slightly different in that it's not just what's pertaining to us, it's what's pertaining to the collective. And so we're asking people to operate from this collective understanding of what our day-to-day should be. But have we helped individuals understand what inner beliefs might be hindering them in acting in alignment with the corporate collective values, the collective beliefs. Right. So it's very much about pausing and taking the time to support our people, and not just understanding here's what our actual values are as an organization, as a collective. This is how we do things here. It's taking the time to help them understand, do you know what your own beliefs are that are influencing you within this greater culture, and how it may be hindering your performance, or how it can help to motivate your performance, your optimal? Are we helping people understand how they can be tied more closely to what the corporate values are, so that there can be more engagement within the organization, or self-select out of the organization? Because nobody's wrong necessarily in their beliefs or their own personal values. They just might not be a right fit for what those collective underlying beliefs are that drive business forward.
Excellent perspective. And then one more piece of research, and you did mention it earlier when you brought up the research from Glassdoor. But on the other hand, LinkedIn, they mentioned that companies that are values driven have employees who are more than twice as likely to recommend their employer to others. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely is so values, well-defined, shared values create strong workplace cultures. Strong workplace cultures, and this is a stat that's been out there for a few years from Forbes, can create up to 4 times revenue growth within an organization. Great. Now, if you're working there and you enjoy working there, why would you not then recommend, here's a really good place, here's why I like showing up to work, here's a great place for you to come and work, here's a company that says who they are and then shows who they are, and those things are in alignment. And that is so key. It's like us recommending a really good toothpaste, right? Here's a toothpaste. I obviously just brushed my teeth. Here's a really good toothpaste. Have you tried this toothpaste? Go try it. You'll love it. Hopefully, right? Assuming that, because typically people tend to be around people who are similar to themselves. So one would assume, hey, if this is the place that I really like to work, here's why. They empower their employees. They give us autonomy. They allow us to use our skills and grow. And we all understand how we're connected to where we're all going. Come and join us. We need good people over here. Come and join us. Of course, why wouldn't you recommend that?
And you mentioned the word alignment. I think really that's what a lot of people are looking for, because when there's a disconnect with what a leader in an organization says and it's different from what's actually experienced, there's that part where people are more reluctant to recommend it. I think you brought up toothpaste. It's that 1 in 5 dentist who does not recommend it. It's that
Right?
that dentist was probably not in alignment, but the 4 out of the 5 were.
Right, exactly, right? We can't please everything. And I think that's another big point, is we can't please everybody. So, and not all workplace cultures will be, even the really good, feel-good ones that have optimal people performance, will be the right place for everybody to go to. And so it's crucial for the organization to be super honest with themselves and say, what are our real values? How do we do things here? And not because it sounds good externally, but because this is how we truly do things here. This is the type of people we want to attract. These are the types of engagements that we're wanting to do. These are the types of projects that we're wanting to work on. These are the types of clientele and partnerships that we're looking to have. And those can be very different. And so, I look to corporate values as, are we allergic to them or not? And so very similar to, spinach. Spinach is super healthy for people. Look at Popeye. It is one of those delicious, iron, leafy, delicious things that so many of us, when we ingest it, thrive with. And yet I know somebody who I grew up with who was allergic to spinach, who still is allergic to spinach, and goes into anaphylactic shock. So it's not that the spinach itself is wrong or bad. It's that that spinach is wrong and bad for some people. And so we can't say, well, those values are bad. We can't have those values. These are our values and we own them and they are who we are, and that will attract the people who will thrive when we are honest with the values that we have. And it's okay that not everybody will, because there will be an organization for that individual to go to and thrive with those spinach, right? So that's kind of that understanding of values aren't good or bad, they are. Which is for us.
That's a great way to consider it. And as we take a deeper dive into the topic of values, we'd like to know more about your inspiration and what gave you the passion to really jump into this field and the work you do.
Oh, so much. Honestly, it's my own personal journey where I come from a highly corporate background, had my own mental breakdown, if you will, and I had a leader who showed up in her values in action. And through that, she held me accountable to choosing to save my own life. And that sent me on my own values journey. I started my own business. And it was through conversations with clients that around branding and developing brand voice and everything, where I found that these values that were coming from them were just so gosh darn generic. Yet I knew in my own personal life, I had used values to change my life, to take action, to start living more in alignment with who I am as an individual and stop being a shell of a person. And when you can combine that, you can watch people transform themselves. And when we have leaders who are so aligned with who they are, understand who they are, why they're making decisions, show up as themselves, and model that to everybody on their people, on their team, it's inspiring. That is something that people want to follow, not because they have to, but because they want to. We will never follow an organization's values. We will always be inspired by a leader who shows up in their values. And what is magical, it's like, that's a funny term. What's great is when those values, the personal values and the corporate values, align so closely, because then you can really start to tap into something of greater purpose. And that's just a wee piece of my journey. But it really stems from this moment. Values that weren't mine, they were not bad values, they were not my values. And because a leader of mine helped me choose to save my own life, sent me on a journey of my own values work, allowed me to, interview hundreds of leaders over the past 15 years, there is a very clear connection as to what can happen when we can bridge what values say and what values do, and close that culture gap there.
And then on that note, as you went through your journey, the question is now, why should more people pay attention to this idea of really living out their values in organizations?
Mm-hmm. We're at a crossroads right now. Let's be honest. Well, let's be honest. I hate saying that, but I just did. We are at a crossroads within organizations as to how are we doing things, because how we've done things is no longer working. People's mental health is taking a crash. We are in a talent shortage, and so there is definitely a talent war. As to people need to be connected to something deeper than just the paycheck or the project deadline to show up, because it is easier easier to jump ship. Incoming generations understand that they don't have to take a lot of the same routes that like the boomers did or Xers did, right? Not that those were bad, but there's generational values that and different times that we grew up in. So we need to start understanding how are the generations coming together and what's tearing them apart, and how do we, but the thing is, research also shows that, when studies across the generations have been done as to what keeps you at work, what makes you want to work. Yeah, paycheck is important, of course. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. What's consistent across the generations is to know that there is purpose in their work. Where's the meaning in my work? And this comes down to simple psychology of like self-determination. And individuals have this basic psychological need to self-determine, and that's self-determination theory about autonomy, competence, and relatedness, which we can get into, but that's a deeper conversation. And so that's really it, is how are we helping leaders lead in this new era of business? Because it's not business as usual. It won't be business as usual. People no longer want to be just a number. That was super clear. That was very much the way in the 80s. And corporations must invest in the deeper meaning of their people if they're wanting to reduce turnover rates, because that's just money out the door. It's all connected.
On that note, I like how you brought up the concept of helping leaders lead. And a question came to mind. Why do so many organizations get stuck in this idea of treating values like a marketing project instead of an effective leadership tool?
I think, because most of us don't understand the science behind values, and there's real science behind it. And so it often does come down to really nice, feel-good team building activities. These are the statements that we can champion during our annual general meetings, during our corporate retreats, and that'll be great. But there's real science behind how values influence action. And that's just not something that a lot of corporations understand at this point, and it's not to their chagrin. But even I, when I first started my business back in 2011, I simply Googled, what are good values for my company to have, right? What sounds good? And I got really good values stated back to me by Google. But again, they weren't my values, and I couldn't serve in a way that really allowed my clients to then thrive. And so it's really taking that moment to understand what is going to motivate us when the road gets bumpy in business, because the road will always get bumpy in business. It will never be clear sailing all the way. Even when we're moving towards these huge visions, these really big, hairy, audacious goals, challenges and obstacles will always put themselves in the way. That's not bad. It's just when we are true to what the real values are in action, we can internally motivate ourselves to get over these obstacles, to move through the challenges, to adjust as needed, rather than just give up or belittle and berate and place blame on others as to why things aren't working out.
And when leaders and employees are living true to their values, how should companies celebrate those moments?
Well, I mean, that depends on the organization, doesn't it? I mean, I can't say this is how they should celebrate, but it very much is, little things like acknowledging, hey, I saw that you took an action really founded in our values. That was really neat. That's great. Love it. Thank you. Acknowledge these things when you see the values in action in your organization. And that will look different for every single organization, because at the heart, businesses are people, hence BRP, but businesses are people. And so it will look different for everyone. And a simple pizza party is not a way of celebrating. Don't get me wrong. I love me a good pizza party. I always think there will always be a place for them, but that is not a values celebration. That's just good food. Right. And so it's, what does it look like? And are you making the celebration meaningful to the individual as opposed to a generic celebration across the board? And what does that look like? Get your people involved. Ask your people, hey, how would you want to celebrate this? Because people care about the things that they contribute to.
That's right. Values is more than just pizza parties, bring your dogs to work day, and movie nights. Having real values is having that alignment to what the company stands for and bringing everyone on the same page. So, brought up an excellent point.
Yeah, of course I did. No, I'm totally joking. Oh my golly. Oh golly.
So, Lindsay, if you could wave a magic wand and could change how companies really introduce and teach their values, what would it be?
That's a great question. What would it be? I mean, simply sit down and start asking, who do we want to be as an organization? Where are we now? And what are the stories, the shared stories, the examples, the concrete, tangible ways of being that we do together and can use to move us closer to close that gap?
Wow.
It's about creating joint conversation, and they're not just meant to be developed in a simple workshop exercise. They're meant to be lived and discussed and adapted and evolved over time.
Joint conversation, so it should absolutely be a collaborative effort.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And then let's talk about the future of work. How do you see this concept of company values and just organizations adopting what they stand for? How do you see that evolving over the next decade?
Oh, it depends. I mean, it depends really on how do organizations want to evolve with the changing world, because the world is changing so fast. It's changed so hard over the past few years in particular. I think it comes down to the leadership asking, though, what is really important and who do we want to be as we're doing this? As an organization, who do we want to be? What do we stand for as an organization beyond dollars and cents? Because at the end of the day, organizations are there to serve, or companies started to serve a purpose for some reason, whatever that reason is. And it comes down to the leadership saying, is this how we want to lead? How will we keep our people here? How will we create an organization that people want to work at and stay at? And then deciding so and committing to that, and not simply doing squirrel shiny moment syndromes of, well, that's what they're doing over there. What are you doing and why are you doing? What's that deeper purpose that people can be connected to?
Serving that purpose. And then as we wrap up, what is the best way for people to reach you should they want to learn more about you and the work you do?
Oh yeah. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. I'm there as Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. I'm also BRP Consulting is my company name, and my website is brpconsulting.ca. Email lindsay@brpconsulting.ca. Or easiest way though would be to send me a quick DM through LinkedIn, if you can't remember that.
And Lindsay, before we go, what's your final piece of wisdom for our audience?
Yeah. Values can either move your company forward or stop your growth right in its tracks. Period.
Excellent piece of wisdom. Excellent. And for everyone out there, thank you again for tuning in. We hope you picked up some great insights. Please feel free to share this conversation with any leaders who could benefit from any of the ideas shared today. And last but not least, I'd like to once again thank Lindsay for joining us. Really enjoyed our conversation today. For everyone out there, thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode.